Welcome back to another edition of the Hart2Heart Podcast. And my guest today is Dr. Chris Aiken. He's the editor of the Carlat Psychiatric Report. He's also the assistant professor of New York University and the assistant professor at Wake Forest University. So Dr. Chris Aiken, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me today, Mike.
So, there's a ton of reasons why I want to chat with you today. I've been really following your Twitter lately really hard. I think you provide a lot of good information, especially for clinicians, but also too for people who just want to feel better and improve their mental health with ways, whether it's non-pharmacological based and also pharmacological based. So, a lot of different reasons why I want to chat with you today. But if you could you just give the audience a little bit of a brief background about yourself?
Yes, I'm a psychiatrist, and early in my career, most of my friends had some kind of depression or bipolar, but they were not seeing psychiatrists. So that inspired me to specialize in ways that you can improve your mental health naturally on your own. And I also realized working with people, we shouldn't just jump right to medications, that a lot of people can get better just by making some common sense changes in their lifestyle or doing some brief therapy. So I've made an effort to study all of those and just really study anything that people can do in their daily lives that improves their mental health. The first thing I started with actually was CBT insomnia. I was a resident at Duke and they were studying and learning that. So that's where it all began. And that's still one of the most important ones.
Amazing. Yeah. So CBT, so a lot of people may not know what that means. So it's cognitive behavioral therapy. And what that is that's a treatment for insomnia. So insomnia, if you don't know what that is, that's when people have trouble falling asleep at night. A lot of people have issues with this. And when you have troubles with insomnia, that can lead to depression. It can lead to anxiety. A lot of people can report, worsening of pain. Insomnia can lead to people even eating more calories the next day and can contribute to obesity. So there's a lot of reasons why you do want to correct insomnia. And that's one of the main things that Dr. Chris Aiken and I are going to start talking about today is, how to sleep better and why you should be sleeping better as well. So, we know again that a lot of people are struggling with sleep, but we also know that it doesn't just start with, what you take at night or just your nighttime routine. And I think one of the things that we, want to chat about today is, the full 24/7 circadian cycle or rhythm and, how you have to incorporate this into a 24-hour routine as opposed to just a nighttime routine in order to get better sleep. A lot of people are familiar with the fact that Andrew Huberman's been talking about, getting sunlight very early in the morning and that kind of thing. But Dr. Chris Aiken, what are the things that people should be doing when they are starting off, trying to make non-pharmacological decisions to improve their insomnia? And particularly, maybe we'll just start a little bit with the morning time initially, and then we'll kind of gradually go in through the rest of the day and how it should look.
Yeah, so you put that well. I think of it, these types of things as going through the looking glass. In Alice in Wonderland, you're going into the opposite world, doing things that are counterintuitive, perhaps. And I say that because we have to ask ourselves, why don't these mental health problems like insomnia just resolve on their own? And one of the main reasons is that these problems can sometimes make you wish for something or drive you towards something that just makes the problem worse. It's a bit like the Chinese finger lock when you're pulling to get out, but you don't actually get out. So the through the looking glass with insomnia, you phrased it very well there, is to remember that sleep is a 24-hour cycle. If you have insomnia, you're probably going to be focused most on when and whether you fall asleep. And the paradox is that is the least important part of the cycle. So we're not going to be rigid about bedtime. We are going to do the opposite and be rigid about wake time. So if you're seeing me as a patient, I'm not so concerned if you fall asleep in 15 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour. But if you're oversleeping in the morning, that's a crisis. Then you got to call me and we got to troubleshoot that. So to keep it simple, the first way to improve insomnia, the very first step to do is simply to get out of bed at the same time each morning. And like Huberman said, get sunlight, but there's other ways to get that sunlight if you can't step outside.
So when you say, the same time each morning, this is going to bring me to a question of chronotype. I know there's this sleep doctor out there. I forget his name, but people talk about how he has different kind of variations of how to explain your chronotype. I forget he uses kind of like animal sort of thing. And then we have the aura ring, which is very popular now. And for example, my chronotype says that, I don't know if it's accurate or not, I haven't looked into it. My chronotype, for example, says that I'm I think it's early evening something. So it said basically I should be sleeping from 12 to 8. Right now, I don't sleep from 12 to 8. Usually I sleep from essentially 10:30 to 11 until 7 o'clock. That's generally, my time frame, because I work at 9. Getting up at 8 o'clock just wouldn't be, something I could really do, just because it would be too difficult to get to work by 9 o'clock. So, do you try to tell people to discover their chronotype when you're trying to tell them to discover their wake time? Like, how does someone discover their optimal wake time?
Yes, I do. I think that's very important. So let me get you straight, Mike. You're not a morning person from what you're saying, right? Yeah,
like I would say it's I forget the exact chrono. Basically, I was like 1 hour off what I think the average person is, like 11 to 7, I think, and then I'm 12 to 8. So I'm like 1 hour off what the average person would be, I guess you could say. Yeah.
Okay, so you and I are in the same club, but then our listeners are not going to get much variety. But this is important. Now, when I first week of medical school, I read a book that said, what type of doctor do you want to be? Here's all the choices. And really the way to do it is just ask yourself, what gets you up in the morning? And I immediately got depressed because, Mike, nothing gets me up in the morning. I am not a morning person for almost anything, not even a trip to Disney World. So it took me about 8 months to realize that if I just rephrase that as, Chris, what keeps you up all night? Well, you would find me in the library reading psych journals all night long. So I realized I should become a psychiatrist. So what that means in your chronotype is that your dopamine, your brain is more active in the evening, and you're just an activity junkie, but at the wrong time. And about 30% of people are night owls like this. 30% of people are morning larks. So they're the ones who get up at 5 in the morning and want to get going into the surgery suite and do their hard work. And then the rest of the people are just in the middle. I gotta sympathize with you, Mike, because all the health outcomes from depression to physical illness are worse for us night owls. And your question is a good one. Should a night owl just conform to society? If you have the luxury to work your own hours, should you just sleep from 12 or 1 at night till 10 or 11 in the morning and call that a day? Well, I'm a little torn on that. And obviously I'm biased. I mean, I'd like the world to follow my lines. Most people don't have that luxury of making society conform. So I want to talk real quick about a little known medical illness called social jet lag. It's seen in neurologic clinics. And all it means is that you're a real night owl, but you have to get up early for work or school. So you get up early on the weekdays and then you sleep in on the weekends.
I do that a little. I'm guilty of that.
So, just that variation right there, which a lot of us have to settle for if we're night owls, has been shown to increase the risk of depression. And I recently posted a study where they found that increased risk was due not to the fact that you're sleep deprived, but to the fact that you're constantly changing your biological clock. So you asked about sleep today, and I'm going to forget about sleep. Sleep, it may come, it may not come. We hope it comes. But I'm going to focus on the biological clock because that runs every organ in your body. And there's, we don't have a lot of research to say, to really answer your question, if you have the luxury, should you just sleep in? I don't think it's a big deal if you do. But I'm going to speak to people like myself who have to get up early and don't want to. There are ways to modify your chronotype. So I'm going to speak about a professor I know who's a real famous psychology professor, and he's like right now one of the tops. But in college, he almost dropped out of college because he couldn't get up in the morning. It was that bad. And then he discovered this research around blue light blocking glasses, and he started using them at night. And for the first time in his life, he woke up at 6 in the morning, bright and perky. So one way to do it is to wear these blue light filtering glasses, which filter out the blue light at night. And they basically convert night owls into morning people. Another way to do it is to have a dawn simulator in the morning. And let's go back there since you said, let's start with the morning, getting light like Huberman suggested. A dawn simulator is a device that gradually turns on a bright light in your bedroom so it gradually lifts you out of deep sleep. When you're lifted out of deep sleep, you wake up feeling like, oh, here I am, instead of, who did this to me? Why do I have to get moving? Because most of the time, 90% of the time, you and I are awoken out of deep sleep. We're literally yanked out of deep sleep, like when a plane does a clumsy landing and it just goes boom and hits the ground and, oh God, who did this to me? As opposed to a smooth landing into wakefulness. So it's going to gradually lift your brain waves from deep sleep to full awakening over half an hour. The key to buying a dawn simulator, they're about $50 to $100 US, is getting one that's bright, full spectrum, and turns on gradually over 30 minutes, perhaps 60, but at least 30. I have a few products that have been recommended by sleep doctors or tested in sleep labs. They're on my website at chrisaikenmd.com. And these devices, in 5 clinical trials, they were found to improve depression. In one small study, they help people with alcohol use disorder stay sober. Because, by the way, being a night owl is a big risk factor for substance use disorders. You're just up all night and get that activity and going. And they study them in medical students. No surprise, the half of the medical students who got the dawn simulator ended up spontaneously using much less caffeine. So throughout the day, you're going to be more alert and wakeful, and that's going to set you on a better sleep cycle by waking to gradual light.
Yeah, I think you said a lot of really good things there. And I do want to talk to you about the early morning light, because people are going to, want to know specific protocols, not to use Andrew Huberman's term, but anyways, or, a specific, I guess protocol is the best term to use. So if you do have bright light in the sun, so if it's sunny outside, that's number one, correct? Over a dawn simulator or anything else? Would you say?
Let's say if you have bright light and you have practically a glass bedroom with a whole lot of windows.
But I think that from what I've heard, though, Huberman says it can't be through windows. It's got to be direct sunlight in your eyes. And that the other thing, too, is that people sometimes will mistakenly wear sunglasses. And the thing is it's got to be in your eyes. So you're not saying to directly look right at the sun, but it's just that, from my understanding, a lot of the circadian rhythm is coming from the sunlight getting directly into your eyes. And what I was going to ask you about too is, I don't know too much about the dawn simulator, but there's a product, and I swear on my life I'm not affiliated with it in any way, shape, or form. I've mentioned it in my patients and stuff. They're called Luminet 3 glasses. And they're basically a headset of glasses that you put on, and then you kind of click it, and it gives you 500 lux, 1,000 lux, or 1,500 lux volts. And then it's directly into your eyes. And so, the nice thing about that is that if it's, if it's cloudy outside, if you wake up and the 20th, floor of a hotel somewhere and you can't go down stairs, you can just put on these glasses and it will get you some direct sunlight into your eyes. So I think that's something that, could be beneficial for some people if they're, struggling to get out.
So let me just clarify that I really respect Huberman's work, and I love that he's bringing this to the public. A slight difference between him and me, as a clinician, I'm going to be more practical in just what works good enough. It gets you better. It helps. It's been proven in clinical studies to work. He's more of a basic scientist, so he's going to perhaps be more idealistic in what is the ideal. So everything that Huberman said is the ideal, no doubt. And I got, some days I literally fantasize about sleeping outdoors on the grass and just having the sun come over, because it's not just the window effect you're talking about, but having it be overhead is really important too. But nonetheless, you're going to get from
and
me
also too. Sorry, I think that's
Huberman.
Sorry, I think there's just one really important point you made about overhead, because from my understanding too, this relates now to more the nighttime, but it's the overhead lights that may possibly even be more damaging, say, than lights that are just in front of you, than from my understanding. And again, no light is is best, obviously, or no blue light. But the other thing I wanted to ask you too, just about, because you were talking about the blue light glasses, I'm a little bit of a geek on this. So I have blue light glasses, but I also have glasses that block out blue light and green light. So they're, a little bit more intense. So what I do, this is my routine. If I'm going to watch something, me and my fiance are going through Money Heist right now. It's a great show if people want to watch it. So what I do when I'm watching that show is I'll put on the blue light blocking glasses, because if I put those on, I can still kind of see colors and see the characters and that kind of thing. If you put on the blue green light blocking glasses that I have, it's just not fun to watch TV because you can't really see anything at all. And so that's kind of my routine. But is there any evidence that blocking out green light in addition to blue light produces better clinical effects overall? Or is that something that hasn't been studied?
It's more like it hasn't been studied. The few studies we have, so there, again, it might be studied in a basic science way that's promising, and might lead to clinical studies. But the studies we have are on just blue light blockers for sleep. And by the way, I'm a mood, depression, bipolar specialist. They also treat bipolar disorder. They treat mania. So that's a really cool non-medication way. But part of what got me into this is depression and bipolar are really driven in large part by the circadian rhythm. So what I do all day is help patients get regular with their activities and their sleep. And that's why I have to be very pragmatic about it. So the challenge, though, with these glasses is they do make a lot of products, and the products that look better are going to work not as well because they're not going to be as dark orange color. You can wear them and people don't ask questions about them. So they have a lot that just block a bit of light, let's say, to get that strain out of your eyes, perhaps to protect your eyes from the blue light while you're on a computer all day. But what you and I are talking about is circadian rhythm. And I want to share with you something that surprised me. I still don't believe this, but I have to follow the science. So many studies show that just a night light in your bedroom disrupts your sleep, your biology, your weight, your mood. One study found you're twice as likely to have depression if you sleep with a night light on in your bedroom 2 years later. And we see neuroplasticity, that's brain changes in animals. So here's a phrase from a study that really moved me. I know research journals aren't really moving, but this did. It looked at people with a little bit of light, like a nightlight on in their bedroom, and it said, with all that we know from animal studies and the available human studies, there will never be controlled trials of this because that would be unethical. And that took me back, because I'm like, Mike, that they never did controlled trials of saying we're going to give 2,000 people cigarettes to smoke every day and the rest are just going to do something else with their hands and we'll see who get cancer. Like, at some point in medicine, we reach awareness that something is so dangerous, we're not going to test it out on our fellow people. And that's what they're saying about nightlights. Like, this stuff is dangerous. Wow.
That's crazy. That's so important. I'm so thankful that you said that today. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
The point I was making there is that tells me how important this next point is. And I hate to be a stickler. You're going to find I'm very loose about stuff like, yeah, just do what works. But we got to admit that you got to get glasses that block close to 100% of blue light to get a benefit for your sleep. So I will go all Huberman on that one. And I've only found a few brands that have been tested that I'm confident they work that way. Like Consumer Reports did some testing. There's some that have been tested in clinical trials. So I've put those brands on my website, chrisaikenmd.com. There's no commercial bias on it. I'm just linking to other places that sell it so you can get something that was tested.
Amazing, Chris. Well, thank you so much for doing that. But that's a very, very important point, though. So you're saying that we need to block 100% of blue light and maybe I'll get to the time specifications too, but it needs to be 100%. It can't be 70% or 80%. Like, that's not going to provide nearly as much clinical benefit. Is that correct?
Yes. Some authors say over 90%. So I just say close to 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, and like you said too, if someone's listening and they want to find, glasses that do block 90 to close to 100% of blue light. They can find them on your website. So that's excellent. And we'll chat about that at the end as well and put some links out for people. That's excellent. So in terms of the timing, is it 1 hour before? Is it 2 hours before? Like, when should people be putting on the glasses if they want to block out blue light before bed?
The studies in Insomnia did 2 hours before. However, I'm sure that you'll see a benefit, just not as much if you do an hour before.
Okay. So yeah, okay. That's pretty reasonable, I think, for people to be able to handle that. One quick thing too, I know this is not on light, but it always comes up for sleep before bed. And I will get back into light in just a second, but I just really want to make sure that this question gets asked. So a lot of people are very concerned about the timing of their last meal before bed. So there's been a lot of research indicating, or maybe not a lot, but there's been some research indicating that the last meal before bed can potentially disrupt your sleep, potentially disrupt sleep architecture, decrease REM or deep sleep. And then one thing that I found out only about a month ago, it's horribly inconvenient for me because I love spicy food, but I've heard that spicy food actually disrupts deep sleep. So, I will come back to light in a second, but again, just because we're talking about things right before bed, people are saying, keep that meal as away from bed as possible. Just wondering if that's something that you discuss with your patients and what the optimal eating period should be before bed.
No, I don't get into that a lot because I don't think it makes a big difference, but I will admit that I think you're onto something, because we did a large study with bipolar disorder looking at what stabilized mood long-term. It's the same kind of circadian rhythm things that would stabilize sleep. And I'll go over the 4 things because they are important to sleep as well. They are the time you get out of bed in the morning. And that ends up being hard to quantify in someone with depression because they keep getting back into bed. So I'll tell you when it is. It's when you stand up, because that's when your blood vessels have to tighten up so you don't faint. So there's this norepinephrine, cortisol pumping. So the time you stand up in the morning, within 15 minutes, you want it to be at the same time each day. The time you start intense social activity, like the type that you and I are having right now, as opposed to just sitting with strangers at a bus stop, more engaged. And the time that you do your work or chores or school, where you do goal-directed stuff. So those 3, they looked at about 100 things. And the 4th that showed up as really impactful in people's mood was the time they ate dinner. And this surprised everybody in the bipolar research community, because we were all like, what about the time you go to bed? Isn't that important? And as I started this podcast saying, we're not going to worry about the time you go to bed. And the researchers in this study thought that the reason the timing of dinner was important, Mike, was just like you said, because they thought it regulated the timing of sleep. So I think you are onto something there.
Okay, interesting. And yeah, I just want to go over those 4 things again. So it's the time you stand up, you said, or first thing in the morning. Now, the only confusion I can see of that is if people stand up, they go use the washroom, they go back to bed. So when you're saying stand up, you meaning stand up and maybe like you're up, or like, again, it's so difficult to quantify
we'll just keep
that.
Because one thing to notice about all these things I said is they all affect your neurohormones. So think about, I said intense, personal engagement, like think about when your boss called you in for that meeting, or when you went out on a first date. You felt it in your body. You felt your heartbeat. You flushed. You got excited or angry or scared. So those are all your neurohormones pumping. And when your neurohormones pumping, I also quoted the ones that keep you from fainting when you stand up. Those set your biological clock. Yeah, we think of it as mostly set by melatonin, but it's set by these other hormones as well. So to answer your question, Mike, if I do that, then I've just pumped up all my cortisol and norepinephrine, and then I've gotten back in bed and lazed about again. But my clock started ticking, so I've confused my body a bit by getting back in bed, but I at least started the clock, so we started there.
Okay. Understood. And then the time from, you said engaged, and then there was said you the time that you do goal-oriented activity. Did I get that right?
That's right. Yep.
Okay. So what would be the difference between those two? Because I feel like, I'm engaged when I'm doing a goal-oriented activity, and maybe, chatting with my fiance in the morning and determining who's going to do what isn't like, goal oriented, but there's still some goal of like who's going to do this or who's going to do what, and I'm still engaged. So maybe you could explain like the difference between those two behaviors.
Yes, good question. So they may align perfectly, perhaps, if you're at a work meeting where you're intensely planning projects for the company. But for many people, so I should have said more intense goal directed, meaning you're doing real work or chores, not just something that's kind of mindless, but something that takes focus and takes motivation. So your dopamine is pumping when you do it. And I know this is different for everybody. So for some people, it may be driving the kids to school is work, and it's also engaging with other people. So for other people, driving the kids to school might be it's engaging with other people, but it's not like their work mode. So when you're in that work mode, I think most of us know what that is because you're focused.
Yeah, definitely.
You're like, don't interrupt me, that type of thing. So it can be done alone or with, but you're right, they can overlap.
Okay. Excellent. And then also too, I know I sort of veered off when we were talking about light, and I just didn't want to, close that conversation in case there was other items that, maybe people can implement that may, improve their circadian rhythm or their insomnia. I think we nailed it pretty good, but was there anything that I left out either in the morning or the night that we should be talking about a little bit more?
Yeah. So let's get back to the night, because I'll go over some common questions that patients ask me. They often ask, well, should I sleep with the glasses on? That's optional. It's uncomfortable. I wouldn't do it. But the point of these glasses, to back up a minute, is that they create virtual darkness. When you wear these glasses, your brain will think it's in a pitch dark room. And the way it knows that is there are 3 receptors in the eyes. Many of us were taught there were 2, but they discovered a third in the 1990s. There's rods and cones for vision. And then there's melanopsin, which is a non-visual receptor, and it only responds to the blue wavelength of light. And we share it with ancient organisms in the sea. Melanopsin, universally throughout the animal kingdom, sets the circadian rhythm. So that's the receptor that we're affecting here. So when we trick melanopsin by wearing these blue light blocking glasses, the room looks kind of, to me, warm. You think about candlelight, starlight, firelight. Like, these are things I desire. I love to go to the mountains for holiday, and that's what I like, that yellow light at night. So it's actually really nice and soothing, and I can see everything well, but my brain thinks it's in a pitch dark room, and that's amazing. But to carry that forward, then, the real message here is that you need to be either in virtual darkness or pitch darkness where you can't even see your hand all night long. So if you don't sleep with the glasses on, which most people don't, you'll want to get blackout curtains, put black electrical tape over those little annoying bulbs that are on every device, put a towel under your door, whatever you need to do. And this all started at the NIH. They put a ad in the Washington Post calling all insomniacs, and many came, and they put them in a pitch dark room that they made pitch dark with aluminum foil, pressing it against the window. They were on a government budget. And lo and behold, their sleep got better just staying in a pitch dark room, in this case from 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. Now you might think, well, Dr. Aiken, you said 2 hours is fine. Well, insomnia is a bit like having car problems and you got to get back on the road. You know that when you're in the ditch, in the mud, you drive differently. You do weird things with the steering wheel to get back on the road. Once you're on the road, you can put them on an hour or 2 before bed. But if you're having severe insomnia and you got to call the NIH for your insomnia, you ought to put these on at 6 p.m. Now, maybe some listeners are thinking, oh, what about me? I got to put them on at 2 p.m. And I want to say, no, don't put these glasses on before 6 p.m. You wouldn't want to be in a pitch dark room in the daytime for the reasons we just talked about. So respect your circadian rhythm. Some people, like I just described, feel less anxious, feel calmer on these glasses, but they're still just for nighttime.
Excellent. Okay, that's interesting, but it does bring up a couple points there. So first of all, I really like the fact that you just said that, some people should put them on at 6 p.m. And I almost feel silly now for asking you what the optimal wearing time would be before bed, because obviously it's going to be, different depending upon how severe the insomnia is. So yeah, if you're someone who, again, no affiliation with Aura or anything like that, I'm just throwing it out there. But like, if you're someone, your sleep score on Aura is like a 40 every night, you're probably going to need, to put those glasses on at 6 p.m. Whereas, if it's at 85 or 90 and you're doing pretty well, maybe just an hour or two before, would be helpful. The only question I have to that is, so I've also heard Andrew Huberman say that like light evening time of light is also affiliated, I think, with a little bit better sleep, but I haven't researched this as much as the other topics that we've, talked about, meaning, getting morning light and then blocking out blue light at night. And this is something that I haven't really, tried to incorporate in my life too much. But do you have any comment, or is there any evidence that getting this like small window of evening light may provide also better sleep at night?
Not much comment there. People often ask me, because I talk about the dawn simulator, well, Dr. Aiken, should I get a dusk simulator that simulates a sunset? And that might be what Huberman is referring to, is this idea that the diminution of light in the evening maybe will set the phase for sleep. And I've been with sleep researchers at Columbia, and they've talked about this idea. They tell me there's no research supporting it. A lot of dawn simulators have this feature where they can do a dusk simulator, but they say, hey, it makes sense. Like, it just makes sense. Maybe it works. But I will mention, though, that, maybe not everybody wants to put it on at 6 p.m., not just for pragmatic reasons, but you're recreating a dark winter night that way. So if you're prone to winter depression or such, you might not want to do that. So putting it on 2 hours before bed would be right for most people. Extreme insomnia, go for 6 p.m. Bipolar mania, 6 p.m. Another way I look at it in my own life is, this study really moved me. They had people wear these glasses, and they did IQ kind of testing, and lo and behold, they did worse on the IQ testing when they wore the glasses. Okay, so they're bad. But they did better the next day because they slept deeper. And I can relate to that, Mike, because when I put these glasses on, I'm a real, I got to do stuff all the time, or I stay active. When I put these glasses on, man, I'm like, I don't have to do the dishes. I can just mellow out. I can just be. I'm total Buddhist. So I'm not going to do good on an IQ test. I'm going to be like, whatever, okay. But so my point there is that if I know I got something really important the next day, like this interview with you, I'm going to put them on earlier, like 7 p.m., because I want to make sure I sleep deep and can be sharp the next day.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. So I understand that even if you have your circadian rhythm figured out, you can still use the glasses differently if you have to prepare more for the next day. And then also too, I think that's a really important point too about, if you have insomnia mixed with depression, which is obviously extremely common, you don't want to miss out on, that sunlight during the evening that may in fact, be beneficial for you overall. So, I think that's critically important.
Yeah, and one more thing that comes up a lot is patients will try these glasses and they'll come back and say, it didn't work. And it did work, but they're looking for something different. The glasses don't make you tired. I've never heard of anyone saying that. They did work in 2 studies of insomnia, so they probably make you more ready for sleep. But if you're looking to feel knocked out on them, it's not going to happen. What you should look for, the main effect of them, is that they make your sleep more regular and deeper. So basically, you won't notice till the next day when you wake up. Now, for me, the way it is, if I only sleep 6 hours, God forbid, I sleep deprive myself, I was up too late. If I wore those glasses while I was up too late, I'll feel like I slept 7 or 8 hours, even if it was only 6, because I went deeper.
Interesting. Okay. So I am a Oura Ring user. And so, I do get the REM sleep, deep sleep scores, every night. So, you're saying that potentially, Chris, or maybe this has been shown in studies, that if you wear these glasses, you may not only get more sleep, but you may also get better quality of sleep, potentially more deep sleep, potentially more REM sleep. Is that correct?
That's correct. And more regular. So if you find your sleep is all over the map, irregular, it'll become more regular hours.
Okay, fantastic. So, since we is there anything else on light that you wanted to discuss, either morning, evening?
I'll just comment that you probably see this as a doctor. A lot of people use the TV set to fall asleep. So we got to speak to them a minute because they're onto something. I mean, they'll argue with me like, I can't sleep without talk going on because it soothes me. And they're right on. So let's make a pitch for podcasts, right? Because then we take the light out. That's one solution. But I want to speak to people who maybe are afraid of the dark, or what I think happens. One of the biggest struggles of falling asleep that I've honestly not found a good answer for is what we call rumination at night. When you got nothing else to occupy you, your mind circulates in all kinds of worries and negative things and what ifs and what do people think of me and unanswerable questions that because you can't answer them, you just go on forever.
That's what all my patients say. So I'm really happy that you're talking about this. Yeah. Yeah.
So here we should talk about sleep meds for just a brief minute, because there's a paradox in sleep medicine. And I think you mentioned earlier that most societies of sleep doctors, including the American Association of Sleep Medicine, like these are doctors who make their money by prescribing sleep meds. So we can't trust them. Well, even these societies, they recommend behavioral stuff first before a sleep med. And you got to ask, why is that? Well, the answer is simple, and it gets to a real paradox in sleep medicine, is that they measure your sleep quality, objectively measure it, how much you slept and what the quality was. Then they give you a sleep med like Ambien, Zolpidem, and see how you slept. And there's very little difference before and after, but the patient feels so much better or reports that they got better sleep after the Ambien. And that's a paradox they haven't gotten down to, but I think the best explanation is that meds like Ambien, which don't make a big difference on average, they'll make you sleep about another 10 minutes, and they don't improve the quality, but they are amnestic agents. So when you take them, you forget how bad you slept. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make
That's
sense.
The paradox, yeah.
It does make sense.
I don't know why I was getting into that.
That is very, very odd. And I always found it too. I mean, sometimes they are described in a medical way, but it's so odd. We have all these complex-ish names for drugs. And then there's one group of insomniac drugs that are literally referred to in many, like well-published studies as Z drugs, which is hilarious. I think they are termed non-benzodiazepine GABA receptors.
And they do affect the benzo receptor, actually.
They affect the GABA A one, right? And
a different part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So they just affect the GABA A.
In America, we call them Z drugs, and y'all call them Z drugs. But the same ones, Ambien, Sonata, Lunesta. Yep. And so my view on them is that they're really not good or bad. They failed to do what we ultimately want. Is we know if people sleep better, they function better the next day, and they live longer and they're healthier. Okay, there is zero evidence that these Z drugs make you live longer, make you healthier, or make you function better the next day. And I worked with some of the sleep doctors at Duke and Wake Forest who developed them, and they were very optimistic about them, and they've all shared with me their disappointment with them for that reason there.
Yeah, and I have to share a slight disappointment too. Maybe you'll disagree with me, and maybe it will be come to fruition and be better in the future. But Lemborexant, so there's these new classification of drugs called, I think they're actually called dual oxygen receptor antagonists. And Lemborexant or Dayvigo is the big one here in Canada. I think there's a couple other ones that you guys have, like Suvorexant, and there's another one.
Doridorexant is the one that just came out. So there's 3 altogether. Yeah. Okay.
3 altogether. Interesting. So there was one meta-analysis. You probably know what I'm referring to. I think it was published in 2020. And, in the conclusions, it seems like they were, kind of, very confident, saying that, this increases REM sleep and it should be used, first line more than say like Z drugs. And I think they even listed other classifications. So it was a very, very, conclusive conclusion, I'll say. And, the increase in REM sleep was like, oh, this is amazing, because, a lot of people, don't get a lot of REM sleep. And, I'm learning now that REM sleep is almost like therapy for your brain. The more REM sleep we get, it's easier to process your emotions, better emotional regulation, all that kind of stuff. But I got to say, it's not everyone, but it hasn't really worked out with a lot of my patients. A lot of patients don't like that drug. They seem to, the big thing I find with that one is sleep paralysis. And and once you have, and once you have sleep paralysis is a lot different than feeling groggy the next morning. Like I've lots of patients who say, I'll take a sleep med, whether it's, sometimes it's THC, sometimes it's something different. And they'll say, you know what, I'm sleeping better. Even though I feel a little bit groggy the next morning, I'll take it. I'm good. But if someone has sleep paralysis, they don't really want to experience that again. So I find them usually just sort of like stopping it altogether. And I don't mean to make this a pod about Limbo-Rexant or David-Go, but I'm just wondering, what your thoughts are on that particular set of drugs and if you've had any success with it, or maybe I've just had, the wrong subset of population that I've given it to.
Now you make my heart sink, Mike.
I'm sorry,
Mike Hart, because what I'm going to say is sad and news, but it's truthful news. So I'm going to speak the truth about these things, but get into a sad thing about being human. Is okay. We got the orexin antagonist, Limbo-Rexant, Suvorexant, Doridorexant, and I'm going to throw in there another sleep med. Do y'all have Ramelteon, Rosarum in Canada?
We have Remeron, which is mirtazapine.
Okay, no, it's different. So Ramelteon is a high-intensity melatonin agonist in America and some other countries. But I think in Canada they prescribe melatonin, so that's similar.
Yeah, we definitely do prescribe melatonin. It's over the counter. Yeah, go ahead.
So when we deal with the melatonin stuff or these others you mentioned, none of these are rewarding, so they're not addictive. They don't make you want to take more. They don't activate the reward center. None of them are amnestic agents, so they're not going to turn off your mind, knock you out, so to speak, like that old punk rock song, I Want to Be Sedated, because I got such ruminative thoughts and the world is so crappy that I want to be sedated. None of them are going to do that. And honestly, Mike, that's what a lot of people with insomnia are seeking. When they say they have insomnia, they really have rumination at night, and they manage it all day by distraction and by being active and focused, which is a great way to manage it. But once you're in that dark room, because Dr. Aiken said be in a dark room, you got nothing to distract you. But let's get back to the TV for a minute. So the TV, okay, turn off your TV. That's true. But what if you can't sit there because the thoughts keep coming up? And Dr. Aiken said, don't take the Ambien because it's just making you like a amnestic anesthesia kind of case. And not helping your health. Well, what can you do? We have about 12 studies showing that music at night improves sleep as much as Ambien. So there's a good step. And there's a song that was developed with sleep researchers called Weightless by Marconi Union. It's a 10-minute track. Yeah. Oh, great. Free on YouTube. And be careful. Don't listen to it while driving. It is going to lower your blood pressure and your anxiety, and you might get a little sleepy. So that one, it can really work. But really, all this sleep research with music, the bottom line is use the music you like, because the pleasure center needs to be activated for you to have some pleasure and ease into beautiful sleep as opposed to restless rumination. So that's one. If you really are afraid of the dark, you can use an orange night light, which they sell. I have some on my website or they're on Amazon. It's a blue light, zero blue light night light, and that can be left on. That's probably fine. You can have audiobooks or podcasts on. There's a lot of boring ones out there, but I want to say in these studies of music, they often used audiobooks as the control group, so music worked better for most people. All right, well, I've got that out of the way about. Let's get off Ambien. Let's realize what Ambien is doing for us. It's making us forget how bad the nights are. And now let's get back into these orexins, because I'm slightly optimistic about them. So to dovetail on what you said, it is true that they improve sleep quality some, which none of the other sleep aids really did. And we do have exciting evidence that they improve next day functioning, like in older adults. So that's the bottom line. Like whenever I talk to insomniacs, I got to back up and be like, well, wait, why do you want to sleep? What's so important about sleep? And I can't function the next day is like the big reason. So I'm excited about them. But if you do take one, and I think they are better for you, healthier than the Z drugs, if you do take one, you should know that you're not going to get that spaced out, knocked out feeling that Ambien gave you. On the other hand, there's a serious risk with Ambien and the Z drugs is that sometimes people get so spacey, they kind of get in a dissociative state and they go and cook dangerous stuff or they even drive their car. So that's now a black box warning on those meds. These other ones are not going to do that. But then, Mike, you touched on the only serious risk with these meds, and that is sleep paralysis. So because they work on the orexin system, which is the system that keeps you awake, they shut that system down. Mm-hmm. Some of your listeners may know about a neurologic illness called narcolepsy, where that system is disrupted and you suddenly fall asleep. Well, people with narcolepsy, it's about 1 in 10,000 people, also have sleep paralysis. So anyone who has narcolepsy or sleep paralysis, those often go together, should not take those meds. And if you do develop sleep paralysis on those meds, I would never take it again, because it's a sign that it's messing with that part of your system, orexin, in a bad way.
I have a question on that too about cannabis. So just so you're also aware, Dr. Aiken, like, yes, I prescribe cannabis, but like I am very big on CBD during the day and not using more than a 1-to-1 ratio at night. So meaning like, I don't like when people use more THC than CBD. I think that when you use more CBD than THC, generally people get better results. And again, this is just anecdotally, but when people use THC, almost without question, there are some people, but most people generally have to use higher and higher doses eventually to get the same effect. Not for everybody. I have some patients that, for whatever reason, they can take 10 milligrams of THC, maybe it's placebo or not, and they've been taking the same dose for 4 or 5 years and, it works for them. But I do try to, minimize people using what I sometimes called unopposed THC or THC without CBD. I'm going to coin that term.
Step in. Part of the reason there is THC, particularly on its own, can cause psychosis, addiction, and mania. Stuff, mental health problems we don't want to see. So the CBD kind of does the opposite and protects against that. Is really good to have that balance.
I will say too, and I'm not going to push back too much on this, and I understand there's dangers with THC, but I do think that for, saying that it causes psychosis, I think it's mostly in people who are susceptible to it. I think that for most healthy adults, I mean, if they may have, a terrible experience when they're using THC, but in terms of, putting them into like full blown psychosis, I think it's probably only 1% or less of the population that would likely.
And this is where our audience should know, that I'm a psychiatrist. So I'm seeing those people that are vulnerable. You're in primary care, so you're seeing a different population. And so I just want to emphasize why you're using the drugs in that way, because the CBT is going to provide a really positive buffer. And as far as CBD goes, that's really the only one I study because, as you can tell from my population, I'm not going to let them touch THC. But with the bipolar and psychosis that I'm already treating. But with the CBD, there's evidence that it's neuroprotective, which is just a good thing, protecting brain cells. There's evidence that it improves sleep quality. So I see a lot of positives there, but the studies are small, so we're still not sure. And the products are hard to get reliable, it seems. And it's kind of expensive in America, too.
It is. It's very expensive. I'll get into that in a sec. But my question that I want to get to was that, so if someone is using THC and potentially they're not getting too much REM sleep, would they be at higher risk for sleep paralysis if they introduce Dayvigo or limborexant, because it's going to put them now into REM sleep? Like, is that potentially going to cause more paralysis if you're using high THC versus someone, say, who's not a cannabis user?
That's a really good question. I can see how you've put a lot of really cool science together there, Mike. And I just don't know that we have studies to answer that. And I was about to say, I doubt that the pharmaceutical industry is going to test their drugs in people on a lot of THC. But I do want to give the pharmaceutical industry credit because they did something I've never seen before. Most of us docs don't like to give sleep meds to older adults. because we know a big risk of death is falling, and sleep meds make you fall. And the big controversy out there is, so they test them in young people, and then docs end up giving them all to older adults, right? Because that's who has the sleep problems. So in the studies of these orexin meds, they gave them to older adults. Many of the studies only enrolled older adults. They would wake these older adults up in the middle of the night, make them stand up and shake them to see if they would fall. And they didn't fall. And
wow.
I posted last week that there were more falls on placebo than on the orexin antagonist sleep med. Now that got my head spinning. It wasn't like a big statistical difference, but you can imagine, Mike, like, don't you play better sports if you sleep well? Like, you're a bit more coordinated, you know, you're a better driver. So maybe if we really help people's sleep quality, maybe they won't fall. That's like my new hope there. Otherwise, we've been afraid of the two.
No, I love it. And like I said, I'm not, done with Lemborexant or Dayvigo or anything like that. Like, I'm still, open to using it. And I wish too that it came in 2.5 milligrams here. I think it's only available in 2.5 milligrams in Japan. That's what the rep told me anyway last time. We only have 5 and 10s here available, and they are, for whatever reason, and they're not scored. So it's a little bit difficult to chop up the 5 milligrams unless you got like a really good pill cutter, But I know that we only have maybe 10 or 50 minutes left or so. I'm not sure how much more time you have there, Chris. And maybe we can get into a few more, how to sleep better things. And what I'll do, first of all, is I'm just going to describe a little bit, my sort of sleep environment. And maybe you can describe your sleep environment and, what we can add to it. So, first of all, just start off by saying I always, wear those glasses in the morning, or I also, try to get sunlight during the daytime, or during the first like 5 to 15 minutes that I get up. So, that's one thing that I do right away. During the day, there's not too much, I guess, I'm really doing to, control my sleep for at night, other than, I do try to schedule a workout that's not too close before bed. That's something that I do struggle with a little bit. And maybe you can sympathize with me a little bit. That as a night owl, is that I've never, even though I work out every day and I'm very diligent with it, I don't do it before work. It's always after work. Right. And so, sometimes I am working out kind of late. Like, last night, for example, I was, I didn't really get on the treadmill till almost about 7 o'clock or so. So, then I got in the sauna probably almost close to 8. So it was 8:30 before I got out. And then, 9 o'clock really before I started eating supper. And I did go to bed a little bit later last night around 11:30. So it wasn't, too bad. I did get that close to that 2-hour window of, eating before bed. And then, nighttime, I think it's important to try to, the hour or two before bed, not to do anything stimulating. So I try not to do any work or anything like that, at least an hour or two before bed, kind of just like, hang out with my fiance. One thing that I am a little bit guilty of, it's Emily's fault, but, she really wanted, but so we do have a TV in our bedroom now. It's something I've never had before. I don't feel like it's disrupted me. My fiance sleeps like a champ every night. Like, her sleep scores are 90 every single night. Like, it's crazy. And she does it and she's okay there. And then within our environment, within the room. So, like you said, it's funny you brought up the red nightlight. So we do have a red nightlight in our bathroom. And then we actually even have red lights in our kitchen. So our home's all on like one floor. So we even had red lights in the kitchen so that nighttime, we don't get that nothing in there coming in. And then I use a lavender diffuser. I put in a few drops. That seems to help. I've seen some studies saying that, I'm going to probably say this wrong, but bergamot also kind of helps a little bit with sleep as well. And then other things we do are, keeping the room completely black, completely dark. I use the glasses, the blue blocking glasses, an hour or two before. And then sometimes I'll switch over to the blue green ones, like right before bed. A little bit tedious. You probably don't have to do that. I don't know if I'm missing, anything else there, but those are sort of like the main things. And also too, the temperature. That's probably almost the most important one, especially if, you're with someone and you guys, don't vibe on the same temperature. So, Emily's okay to sleep at 64 degrees, which is where I like it, which is pretty cold. But that's sort of my sleep environment and sleep architecture. Maybe you can, mention the things that you do, and maybe, things that we aren't doing that we should be doing, so that people can maybe have a few implementable things that they can take away today.
Wow, Mike, that's exhausting.
That is exhausting.
So I really feel you got a simpathico here in the States, because I'll be doing the same thing with you in a similar time zone. Similar stuff, man. So that's really great. And I'm glad you brought up temperature, because the circadian rhythm is largely driven by light. When you get in darkness, your melatonin goes up, your natural melatonin. And when you have that dawn simulator or bright step outside for the sunlight, your melatonin goes down. Now, when I say that, a lot of times patients will say, "That's great, doc," and then I won't have to do all this stuff. I'll just take melatonin. And we don't see the same benefits that we've talked about here with prescription melatonin. There's a little bit of sleep benefit, but nothing like all the health benefits and benefits in mood that we've gone over. And my analogy there would be like, if you go to the gym and touch all the equipment, but don't move your arms, that's like dripping melatonin on your brain, but you've not pumped it out. It doesn't do much. So there's more to it than just melatonin. I want to talk about another chemical, because I know you're thinking about coffee, but you left that one off. So I'm going to go there.
Adenosine.
You got it, man. So the cool thing about, and we didn't talk too much about CBT insomnia other than these very important circadian parts of it. The other part of CBT insomnia is often done with the therapist. It involves intentionally sleep depriving yourself a bit to pump up your adenosine. And they go through all these complex formulas to figure out how much to sleep deprive you. There's apps that do it. There's one for veterans that anybody can download free called CBT-I Coach. And
cool.
If you just want a real simple way to do it on your own, I would say restrict yourself to 6 hours in bed at night. So you only allow yourself to be in bed for 6 hours. If you have to get up at 7, then that means you'd be in bed from 1 to 7 every night. So you're intentionally sleep depriving yourself to pump up your adenosine, because the nature of CBT insomnia is that there are two forces that drive our sleep. One is circadian, that's melatonin. And the other is sleep drive, and that's driven by adenosine. And the reason adenosine matters in our routine is adenosine is linear. The longer you stay awake, the more it rises, which means don't worry if you have insomnia. You just keep staying up. Eventually you're going to crash. I promise you, you will. It's okay. And I know the journalism says, oh my God, if you have a bad night of sleep, you're going to die early of cancer. No. That's if you struggle with irregular sleep routines and light at night. Light at night causes breast cancer. We learned that from Canadian nurse studies. So night shift workers. So no, forget that journalism. It's okay to sleep deprive yourself. They find that intentional sleep deprivation to get yourself back on track through CBT insomnia reduces inflammation, improves your health. Though there's measurable improvements in biological health a few weeks later, and it improves your sleep. So how do we maximize our adenosine besides sleep deprivation? One way is to avoid caffeine, because caffeine suppresses your adenosine. So if you're going to use it, just use it in the morning. Don't use it after 2 p.m. Minimize it, all that good stuff. What I do in my life is I switch to tea, because tea has about 1/3 the caffeine of coffee. Tea has other ingredients like L-theanine and other things that improve cognition, reduce anxiety, reduce blood pressure, and L-theanine improves sleep in some studies. So tea is going to be friendlier to sleep and friendlier to your mental health than coffee.
Just one quick question on that. Do you have that tea immediately upon waking, or you do the delay your caffeine for 90 minutes to 2 hours? Or do you feel like that's...
I know that's the Huberman thing you're alluding to, and I'm not hip on that, I got to say. But I'm
not hip on it either. And I've seen a review recently that said
okay.
Yeah, no, I think it was Max Lugaver. I always try to give people credit for where I read the study, because I'm a PubMed nerd. I think it was him that put it out that showed that having your coffee in the morning had no effect, and it was like a fairly large review. Now, again, I'm not saying there's no benefit to not doing what Huberman does, because, I started doing it, and I was like, oh, now if I wake up in like, the hotel with like, with my fiance on the weekend, I don't have to, go to the coffee maker right away. I can just, go to breakfast like a normal person, get a coffee then. So, I think that there's like still some benefits to doing it, but yeah, in the scientific review that was put out, I think, just this year, maybe a couple of weeks ago, that didn't seem there was.
Oh, that's wonderful. I got to check that out. Thank you.
I'll see if I can find it. I'll find it and send it to your email.
Please send it to me and I'll post it. I'll refer the reader to something that did change my life, which if you Google Psychiatric Times, the cognitive benefits of matcha. Okay. So this study came out and made me switch to matcha because that's the more intense, ground up green tea. And when I say tea, I'm talking about green and black, not herbal tea. And what this study did was they had people do those kind of mundane, boring exercises like alphabetizing things. Who wants to do that? And you need to have a little bit of caffeine to do that, right? And so they gave half the people caffeine and half the people matcha every day for like 2 months. And lo and behold, they both helped equally. So that's great. Just take your caffeine or take your matcha. But what moved me was then at the end, they had people stop their drink or their caffeine and tested them again. And only the ones who got the matcha continued to have cognitive benefits. So it's going to make you sharper. And that's those other ingredients I said that tea has. And it's going to be a more sustained effect, not that addictive. And then you get withdrawal effect that caffeine has. So matcha or tea is going to have some caffeine, which we all like, but it's got other good stuff.
Yeah, the L-theanine, I think that was, there was a study down in, I think it was 2008, so it was a while ago now, that showed that, when you take L-theanine with caffeine or with coffee, it can, substantially decrease the jitteriness from coffee. So it is something that I think is beneficial. And from my understanding too, there's more L-theanine content in green tea than there is in, black tea or oolong tea or other types of tea. Yeah. And then the matcha tea, does that even have a higher content of L-theanine than green tea? And are there other potentially like, antioxidant components in it that are potentially just, waving off oxidative stress, and potentially that, throughout the long term can potentially help cognitive processes?
Yes, they're called polyphenols and catechins, and they've been shown on their own to have some cognitive benefits in animals and neuroprotective type benefits. But to what you're saying, matcha really is ground up green tea, so it's going to have the same ratio, just more intense of whatever the green tea has. And I like what you said about a colder room, whatever you can do, whether it's a fan. I will emphasize circadian rhythm is also driven by temperature. And here's another trick. If they used to do this in sleep clinics in the 90s, it is particularly these studies were done in postmenopausal women, but I think it can benefit everyone. If you think about the old days, 1,000 years ago, it would get hot and then it would get cold at night, triggering sleep. So how do we replicate that in our HVAC air-conditioned worlds? Well, you take a hot bath 2 or 3 hours before bed to raise your body temperature, and then it's going to lower just like the old days over the next 2 hours. Then you sleep in a colder room, and you've replicated the circadian temperature change there. And that's been proven to deepen sleep quality, particularly, again, in postmenopausal women. But this is not something I've done it a few times. And, when I have a rough day, that instead of alcohol, that'll be my thing to ensure relaxation and deeper sleep. The exact directions here, we really need to be careful about specs. When I say hot, I'm talking like 102 degrees, as hot as you can touch, basically. Don't burn yourself. I'm talking no longer than 20 to 30 minutes because you could damage your skin going too long in there or get an infection. And I really want to warn people to be careful. Don't use sedatives with it. Of course, you don't want to drown. And when you get out of the tub, your blood pressure is going to drop. It's going to cause what we call orthostasis, and you could faint. So be very slow and careful, particularly if you're an older adult or taking blood pressure medicines. So this isn't for everybody. And people trying to get pregnant shouldn't do it. It can affect fertility. People with skin disease shouldn't do it, or heart disease, or taking sedatives or alcohol when you do it. So not for everybody, but a hot bath or a colder room, very important for sleep. What about,
so sauna use has really exploded over the last few years. What do you think about using a sauna a few hours before bed?
Perfect. And so the whole point is just to raise your body temperature. Your body has to fight off that temperature, so your core body temperature goes down. when I did it, I'll share with you, Mike, like my office is really hot, and all day I'm like, it's too hot in here. The next day, for the first time in my life, I felt like my office was cool because my body temperature had gone down, and I felt so refreshed and bouncy because I slept really deep. But there's always a real good effect the first day. You get like a honeymoon effect.
Yeah, no,
they are studying this hot bath and, like you said, sauna, passive heat. So anything that heats you up. They're studying it for depression too, and they're seeing good results. Just heating your body up once a week, doesn't have to be every night, seems to help depression. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, I've seen Dr. Rhonda Patra, I think, has posted some studies about that recently. I need to look into it a little bit more. I saw her kind of post it, but I didn't, look into the details. I'm kind of guilty of that.
Oh, I got one more tip for you. As a common night owl, I've preached this to my patients who are all night owls, and now I do it myself. Anything that would normally keep me up all night, that's things I love, I do it in the morning. So you'll notice I post my Twitter in the morning. I do my social media. I do my fun stuff in the morning. So bring that blue light, that device, do your video games, whatever you love, do it in the morning, not at night.
Yeah, I think that's a major thing that, people get wrapped up in doing is, they leave an important task, for later in the day, and then they're thinking about it. And then of course, they can't go to bed because they didn't complete that task, or they complete the task too late and now they're sort of, ramped up from completing the task. So, very, very important. You read this in any kind of self-help book is like, do the hardest thing first in the morning, so I think that's, an incredibly important point that can help a lot of people. I know this has been, do you have a few more minutes there, Chris? I'm not sure if you have to go.
Sure. I'm off duty today. Yep.
Okay. Excellent. I know a lot of people, and I've posted about this a little bit recently. What about red light therapy? Is there any evidence for that at all? Or is that still just something that's completely anecdotal?
I think anecdotal for depression, you mean?
For insomnia and for depression. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not up on that research, so can't comment.
Okay.
I can speak to light therapy, which you alluded to earlier, and I'll say that there's some evidence that those glasses work for depression. Whatever light product you get, like glasses or light box, make sure that it has a UV filter because you don't want to damage yourself with UV waves. That's the main message there. Otherwise, yeah, there's really good evidence that light therapy in general treats depression. There's even studies where it treats insomnia. Besides the Dawn Simulator, just waking up at 6 or 5 in the morning and getting a big burst of light, what is that going to do? That's going to totally reset your body's. That's like you're off the side of the road and the tow truck comes and yanks you back on the road. That's like resetting everything, a total reset or a computer reset. And that'll treat insomnia paradoxically, light in the morning does.
Yeah, I've talked about this on the podcast before, but so I'm one of these people who I do like all-inclusive vacations. So I kind of like going somewhere, and I do like doing nothing for a week but reading and then, just kind of hanging out with Emily. I enjoy that. But it's not for everyone, but I always find that when I'm there, I understand I'm not working, I'm more relaxed and that kind of thing, but I always sleep better, and I just feel that it's like, because I'm kind of doing the same thing every day. I get up, fairly early every day. Like we're always kind of one of the first ones out on the chairs because we basically go to bed after dinner kind of thing. And, I find that I'm just so much, I guess you could even say just happier, energetic, my mood's better. I just love it, like being out in the sunshine all day. And there was one important point that I want to bring up, because this, I haven't posted yet, but I'm going to. Actually, no, I did post it on Twitter. There was a study that showed that for red light, and I couldn't believe this, they compared it to exercise, enriched environment, computer stimulation, something, and something else anyways. And it showed that red light, and this is a meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials, that red light was actually better for improving cognition than all those other metrics, which I couldn't believe. I thought, for sure nothing would ever beat exercise for, staying off Alzheimer's or cognition or that kind of thing. And
okay, that's the first I've heard of anything beating exercise. That is amazing. And
they were very, pragmatic in the conclusions. Out of all four, it seemed that red light therapy was the best. Like I'm, kind of messing up there and paraphrasing, but that was essentially was what they wrote in the conclusion. So I do think we have a lot more to learn about light. So I'm really, happy that we've kind of concentrated most of this podcast on light.
Yeah, I bet seasonal depression's got to be a real thing in Canada, I would guess.
Oh, big time. And, people are low in vitamin D like crazy. Like every time I test someone's vitamin D, it's almost always low. Whoa. So, wow. Very, very important for people in Canada to take their vitamin D.
Yeah. So we don't have time to go into how to use a light box and all that. But if people are trying to use a light box, check my website, chrisaikenmd.com, or go to cet.org, and you'll get some sound scientific basic ways to use a light box effectively and not do anything that's going to mess you up with it. And of course, talk to your doctor more about it, because that's a serious treatment for depression, can work sometimes twice as effective as an antidepressant.
Amazing. And so we've gone over light today. We've gone over a lot of things. I know we're trying to wrap up here now. Is there anything that we've kind of left out that we should have discussed? The only thing that I have written down there that I forgot that I mentioned that I personally use is white noise. That's something that I do use at night before bed. Yeah. I just find that it makes, I guess just makes me sleep better. I don't know why, but for whatever reason. I should have mentioned
when I do when I touched on the pleasure principle, pleasurable music. Hey, if you're a music scholar, music might keep you up. White noise or pink noise, which is nature sounds, grasshoppers and waves. That's great too. So all those are great. Whatever works for you is the real message there. And I'll mention the other side of that. So they did a study in Australia where they looked at what made people more energetic in the morning. That's what we want.
Yeah.
Anything that makes you more energetic. And it was tunes that are, of course, pleasurable, but that are also catchy, very melodic and catchy. And their top two tunes were The Cure's Close to Me, another one, da, 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 and then the Beach Boys' Good Vibrations. And those are just very beautiful, catchy. I can't get their earworms, can't get them out of my head.
That's awesome.
But to close, let's get back to what you said about sleep is therapy. And I want to end with that because we know Sigmund Freud, who helped develop psychotherapy, his first book was on the interpretation of dreams. Like for him, dreaming was therapy. That's how he did his own therapy. And there's some real truth to that. Fast forward to Matthew Walker's wonderful book on why we sleep. And in there is a little nugget that if you dream about things that are emotionally, symbolically resonant with the stress you're going through in your day-to-day life, you will recover from that stress faster.
Wow.
So sleep. I see a lot of patients who can't afford psychotherapy. I either send them to Canada where it's socialized and they can get it, or I tell them focus on your sleep because that's going to be their free therapy overnight.
That's incredible. Yeah, and I think that's an important message for people to know, and not to get too into detail there, Chris, but is it mostly the REM sleep that you're talking about?
It's just deep sleep and dreaming. So your dreams are curative. They're wonderful things. Pay attention to them. The more you keep a dream journal or pay attention to the dreams, the richer they're going to be and the more you're going to dream.
Amazing. Okay. So Chris, where can people learn more about you? Please leave your Twitter handle and anything else that you have where people can find more about you and what your work and what you're doing.
Yeah, it's all just Chris Aiken MD, whether it's Twitter, Threads, Facebook, LinkedIn, my website, Chris Aiken MD. So if you just AIKEN, remember that, you can keep up. And that's, I didn't realize till I talked to you, but that's, I think, what inspired this Twitter thing was getting into a daily routine of one study, one research paper a day, one scientific paper every morning. It's part of the ritual. So I hope you all will join me in the ritual. Thanks for having me on, Mike.
Yeah, no, it's been amazing chatting with you. And like I said, your Twitter feed is amazing, not just for clinicians, but for everyday people who want to learn more about psychiatry and more about how to improve their mental health, also with non-pharmacological therapy. So, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. So please follow Chris on Twitter. Please go check out his work. Thank you, Chris, for coming on. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And as always, I'll be back again with another episode soon.